All right, welcome back. If you watched my last video, I did a review of kind of a whole bunch of different boots and the boot journey that I have had over the short time that I've been hunting. There are lots of people that have done reviews about boots, and there's lots of options out there. So my experience by no means is any more impactful than those. However, and frankly, I think I'm still learning exactly what's right for me and what fits me. However, something I do think I can speak to is durability. We'll get into some of the things that I have liked about these Salewa Mountain Trainer 2s and where I think they have done well and where I think they just have not. And I think I can speak to some of those things relatively well, and maybe that gives, maybe we see some changes to the way that these are constructed, because I think that there were some changes made not, with previous generations that I didn't try, but having seen pictures of them online and stuff like that, there were changes that were made in these, this second version that I think actually decreased. Like, I don't see how it increased. And I actually would argue that I don't even see how it could have remained the same, and definitely decreased. Definitely in my mind had an impact on the durability and the long-term, durability of the shoes. So, I briefly mentioned this before in that previous video, but the Mountain Trainer 2s were kind of. I went down to the Go Hunt store. Tried on a bunch of different shoes, and these really fit well. Like, I felt like I had a good snug fit that only continued to get better as time went on. However, a few days into wearing them, I noticed that the string lacing points, so that's a key feature of these Salewa Mountain Trainer 2s, that these string lacing points would start pulling out. And I mean, I at one point had one that was coming all the way across to like the other lacing point, like literally had stretched out that long. And it didn't do it by making others tighter. Like, the way that they must build these in is like two long pieces of string that are possibly threaded in here. Or I'm sorry, one long piece of string for each of these is possibly threaded in here or something like that, and glued or sewed. Actually, probably glued, based off of the fact that I guess maybe sewed here and then glued, and that would just tend to give. One thing I will say is that for every time that happened, they replaced those shoes. And Salewa, over time, has been very good about replacing shoes under warranty. They provide a 2-year warranty for their shoes, at least as of the last time I checked, which was probably a couple months ago. And they've always honored that. And so I will give them credit for that. However, it basically got to the point where anytime I would get a new pair of shoes, a new pair of Salewas, I would just take some super glue and literally glue these string points before ever wearing them. And that was kind of a way to make that last longer. These, I don't have the dates written in these ones. I believe this was the first replacement pair that I got, which would have been like, I think 2021. 2022, actually. As you can see, some of the leather has given it like crease points and things like that. I don't know that that's necessarily unexpected. I've worn some of these shoes into the ground and probably haven't treated as much as needed, cleaned and treated as much as needed. And so some of that type of stuff happens for sure. If you're not making sure that the leather stays super conditioned and things like that. I will say I have never had a shoe that I've been super confident that has given away waterproofness. Any time where I thought maybe like there's just as much likelihood that water has come in kind of like through the tongue or gotten out my pants and kind of soaked down through my sock or something like that. It's never been like clearly like, oh, there's a ton of water coming in. So I have appreciated that. The Gore-Tex has, from everything I can tell, held up well on every single pair I've had. Montana, as I have said before, seems like oftentimes 3/4 of the year we're covered in either snow or mud. A lot of places I hunt are, have lots of different like soggy points, little swampy, boggy, wallowy type areas, from cows grazing or whatever, little creeks and stuff like that that kind of just expand out, et cetera, that it's nice to have that waterproofness, and it's pretty much a requirement, as well as lots of frosty early mornings where sun's not really out till close to noon. Your feet would just stay wet for most of the day if you're wearing something else that did soak through. So that's been something that has been good about these. I had a pair that before these ones ended up getting these were actually replacements for, where the stitching here gave way, and you can see even now like this stitching is starting to give a little bit, which also led me to start taking some super glue and just running it along these stitch points. I don't know if it's just the way that I tie and cinch my shoes or what, but that has clearly been a point of failure as well for these shoes. Once that does fail, debris gets in, a little rocks and stuff like that, and then gets in between that and the Gore-Tex booty, and just is now, well, it's like having a pebble in your shoe that you can't get out or something like that. Really annoying. Caused a couple blister spots and things like that. So that was kind of always the challenge that I had with these, is they just did not feel like they held up over time. I do wear shoes like this on a fairly regular basis, anywhere between probably 3 to 5 times a week, maybe. And in hunting season and out, and I want, I don't know, maybe that's a ridiculous expectation on my part, but I feel like they should get me 2 years without breaking down and needing to be warranted. Maybe even a little bit longer, especially when full price. If you're not getting these on the sale or something like that, you're looking at paying around $300 for them. Maybe that's unrealistic. I don't know. These are about a year and a half old. We're about a year and a half old, when even my method of gluing the string lacing points in, it still just started to fray, come apart, and that's really kind of what has led me away from these. The fit was always phenomenal. It felt like I got ankle support, but didn't get ankle restriction from these shoes. The flex, very flexible, which so far I have found works better for the way that my feet work, and for just staying up on my feet, not falling and things like that. I have found more issues with stiffer shoes than with more flexible shoes so far. The last thing I will say is the sole has not always been the most, I have come to believe that this sole is really, really focused on being excellent for soft ground. Muddy, maybe. Dry works. Snow and ice, and even just wet rock and stuff like that, I always knew I needed to be more careful. Um, even like wet pine needles or uh, like juniper type brush. That was always a place where I needed to be more careful with these soles. I've tried some other soles since that seem to be a little bit more stable on some other shoes when it comes to those things. But something to note that, like, clearly no sole is meant for every type of terrain. And these are no different. It seems like they definitely really look to be great on that type of terrain that you can get a lot of traction in, almost put a boot print in. That's where these maybe excel. Some of that more slippery stuff, you definitely should be paying attention because you might go down. That's been my experience with these. I wish that these lacing points weren't what they were. I think if they weren't, I probably would have lived with this, and probably just attributed it to the way, like, I cinch down laces or what have you. And probably would just keep dropping some super glue on there to help hold those stitches, etc. These lacing points really just open up to a lot of opportunity for failure. I mean, even like some sharp rocks and stuff like that could probably grab some of those laces. And that might have, you can see this one's really failing right here. That might have been what happened, is something sharp last hunting season grabbed it. The last thing I will say is that these are a heavier boot. This suede leather, even treated, has done an okay job of, pushing off light snow and such, light frosts, like dews, maybe even some heavy dews. But this last season was a bit more wet consistently throughout the day, and I ended up with these shoes pretty much just wet for 5 days and never really drying. And that was a bit of a wake-up call. It has led me to move to a little bit lighter leather implementation. And, just looking for a boot that's even a little bit lighter, because once they got heavy, they got real heavy. And trying to find something where the water isn't maybe going to soak in quite as much, even with leather, has been a goal. And I don't know if suede versus like non-suede leather, if there's really an impact there, but I'm going to try it out and see if kind of what that experience ends up being for me. Ultimately, I think if they were to change the lacing points, I probably would go back to these shoes. If they were to get rid of these string lacing points. Interestingly, the Mountain Trainers, from pictures I have seen, don't have this, and just have this like leather, have a leather lacing point for each. And they must have done it to try and get these a little bit lighter. Lightness for durability's sake is not always great. Definitely not great. So that's been my experience. Hopefully that helps you decide on whether or not this is going to be a shoe for you. I've heard lots of people not have these issues. Lots of people run these and love them, and I can see why you love them. They fit, like the fit has always been great, and they end up adapting to my foot really well. But the durability was always something that kind of came up pretty quickly for me. How it hasn't for others, I'm not sure. To their credit, they will warranty it, so maybe that's just how they've solved that. But I would love to see something that I could kind of rely on versus just rely on sending back. That's not always that's not the tip, really, the way that I like to go about things. So hope this helped you make a decision, or at least just give you a little bit of information, give you someone else's perspective on having these shoes and having these shoes for you're running these shoes on a fairly regular basis over whatever it's been, three-ish years. if you appreciate this, would love a like. Any comments, any questions, happy to answer to the best I can. As I've said before, I am a very, very inexperienced hunter, but I am trying to just share the things that I'm learning along the way and the experiences that I have, not necessarily from a place of knowledge, just from a place of learning. Like, comment, like I mentioned, I really appreciate it. Subscribe if you want to see a little bit more content like this. It's definitely helpful to know that there are people that might watch it, if I put out a video. I definitely want to get more of this type of content, just the things that I'm kind of learning and growing with, and preparing with as we move closer and closer to this coming season. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day.